We do not own the rights to anything or any music that's heard during the duration of this podcast. Also, a lot of these shows will have explicit content. So if you are not a fan of any cursing or profanity, you may want to walk away, but that does not mean that every show will consist of such. I know y'all tired of it, but we got a new season of The Past. Welcome to season 8, the Mamba Year. Podcast available on all platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all of your podcast platforms. Here you'll get a dose of content related to tech, the productivity world, and most importantly, how to be a better you. The theme for this year, personally, is receiving grace. And we definitely want to do better with receiving it and being open to being a better us from who we were a year ago. So this is season 8 of The Past, and I hope you all enjoy. All right, fair warning. I'm going to go ahead and be real because this is going to be one of those quote unquote unique episodes, and the title will kind of make it clear. And I'll talk about this because it's me being me. Episode 401 of The Past is here. You will hear 400. I will talk about 400 on this episode, even though I'm still in the process of finishing up editing for that show. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we get through this show with no hiccups, no hangups, but we'll see. So we'll kind of let it be what it is. I have a ample amount of topics to address, since I had some topics that I was going to get into for 400, but I had a guest on. I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth, and then, like I said, I'll go through my shares, and we will go from there. Before we go any further, because I am not going to get clipped today, I refuse. All right, cool. Turn off anything that could remotely be in the way. All right, so you will hear, and I will place a disclaimer on episode 400 of this. I was using new equipment for that show, and the equipment worked properly, but it didn't load the content properly. And what I mean by that is, and now that I'm looking at my levels, this makes a lot of sense. The levels for the show were based on each microphone individually. So and this is my personal tech tip to you all, it's probably not gonna be a big deal, but for me personally, it'll be a big deal. I may be able to fix it and clean it up, but I'll see what I got. But I'm just sharing that with you all because it was very noticeable on my end that the listening flow was a little off from the normal recordings that I do with my Yeti mic. My sister had 2 Shure mics. We hooked it up to a Vodcast, which is a great accessory. I think I was editing or running into it, just kind of using it blind. In theory, which I believe I have the software. And I'm going to say that I do. Of course, me trying to look for it now. Yeah, Final Cut. Come on. I know I have it on here. Yeah. Okay. So on this laptop, I have Logic Pro. I had not used Logic Pro on this laptop since owning it. And we'll talk about this too a little bit because this will be interesting. I'm not going to talk about it now, but I will save it as a topic, since it ironically is the topic for the newsletter tomorrow. A year with. All right. Making mental notes as we go. But the recording went fine. Like I said, it Audition had both microphones set at 2 separate levels. I mean, it had the levels set up a little different, where one level would be my microphone, the other level was her microphone. So in theory, what that caused to happen was the left side of the when I would talk, the left side was more dominant. When she talked, the right side was more dominant. The solution to that, which I've never used Audition for it, but it will probably be something to try in the future, is connecting, still using the same accessory to connect the microphones, but instead of doing it as an audio file, do it as a multi-track session, because technically that's what it was, because it's more than one item that's needing to be used for each recording. And I know to you all as listeners, you're going to be like, I don't understand what that means. But in a simpler manner, when you're working with podcasting, and this is ironic because now, like I said, this is the 400.1 episode of explaining little things like this. If you're using a single microphone, you don't have a lot to manage or handle when it comes to audio. However, if you have more than one, now it comes down to making sure that audio distributes properly to, if a person is speaking, it can still be heard in both headphones, and the same applies for every other person that's talking during the show. We both had on headphones, we both had microphones, but we were hearing, and it would even be times of us talking where I would hear some of what she was saying. She would probably be hearing what I was saying, almost as if we were talking in a single microphone. So, long story short, there was a definite learning curve on my part with that, but I'm not using that as like a woe is me, I didn't get the content that I wanted, it could have been a better show. No, the show came out fine. And like I said, I still got a deep unpack of editing to work on for that show. So I'm definitely looking forward to that as a whole. Discipline has been the name of the game, and it's been the battle of the game too, with the podcast and with the flow. And I start with that, or I make that as topic, because ironically, when it comes to doing my show, and I think people who come on as guests end up learning it, I have a way of how I like to do things. And I'm not against like being flexible and being lenient, because things are going to happen. But I'm always, in my own personal perspective, making sure that at the end of the day, the content is generated as it needs to be for the show, and not selling you all as listeners short on getting what you deserve as a consumer of the content. And I'm going to talk about consumption versus creation as well, because that's been like a big topic that resonated with me a lot this week as a whole. I don't even know where to begin with the topic that I got up now. This show, thinking back to when I started episode 1, and literally 400 plus episodes later, you couldn't tell me that I would have this down the way that I do. And I've seen a lot of podcasts come into the mix. I've seen a lot of podcasts disappear. I've seen a lot of podcasts go through multiple transitions. I think my podcast went through 2 transitions. And what I mean by that is it was initially Bryan podcast, if you remember my initial start with the podcast. And then it bumped up to the Past podcast, or the Past podcast. And then it became the Past BT. And I'm still using the Past, but I'm more tied into it being about some stuff. I've been back and forth about this, and I've had conversations off air about this, where I may be integrating sports back into the mix. I will warn you and dishearten you now that there will likely not be any conversation about the All-Star game. The All-Star weekend, you know what? Screw it. This is my show. I'm going to do how I do. To give a very mild description from the All-Star weekend, it was a decent weekend of festivities, but anyone who gave any input outside of the settings of the All-Star weekend, the NBA is going to do what the NBA does, because it's still a product that they have to sell. And if you understand that, it makes more sense why a lot of things went the way they did. And I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I'm hoping sooner than later that I'll get back to the podcast flow with doing sports. I just have to find that way to get, I want to say, I mean, to say it without saying, I have to find some way or some process that'll get that itch back to me to really want to discuss or address sports on the show. I think there are enough, and I always use this term, and people think I'm being funny when I say it, but there are enough talking heads on TV who are talking about it from every angle to the point of no return. And I just don't need to be one of many doing that exact same thing. So that's my 2 cents on that. I've talked about her on my show numerous times, but I always give credit where it's due, even though her style is her style and mine is kind of an individual flow. I definitely will admit the Angie Martinez method or the Angie Martinez structure with podcasting has been what's helped me when it comes to having guests. It's also been my personal usage. Now, I will admit, if I have a lot of topics that I'm personally going to talk about, I will use the application that you always will hear me talk about, which I have in the show notes, the Workflowy app, to look at and make sure I'm on track and on pace of what I'm wanting to address and talk about for the show. The planning structure and the way that the podcast has gone has probably been way better than I expected over the years. And many people who listen to the show can tell, like you'll know if I've done like a freestyle show, and you know if I'm doing a show where it's like, all right, I got my topics ready, I got my thoughts ready, I know how this will all come together. I may even be able to pinpoint exactly how long the show will last from start to finish. But as with anything, there are always those variables and deciding factors that can pop up at any time. I mentioned it already. Workflowy has probably been like the most underrated checklist, task list, item manager that I've used for the podcast. Like I got introduced to it, I would say at least 3 or 4 years ago. If not, I'm saying that amount of time, but it's probably been longer. And I will tell anyone who's starting a podcast, if you're preferring to use reminders or tasks or whatever app you use to keep track of your show and your topics and your ideas, stick with what you know. But I'm the first to say, like, this group and or category has been like a perfect way for it to work in how I've found myself doing my shows and getting everything to kind of come together, because all it takes is change the episode number, get rid of whatever topics I've already talked about, and then just get into the new topics. Because then after that, I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I've already talked about that topic, I don't need to talk about it again. Like, it's so many convenient tools in knowing how to make the show work to my advantage. Like, even right now, while I'm talking to you all, like, I can go in and, all right, I've talked about this already, so I can mark this off. I've talked about this, I can mark this off. And it makes the process a lot easier in your recording structure, so you're not sitting there like feeling as though you haven't finished what you needed to get your show completed. I'm gonna add one other thing, because I think that might be our message today. Piecing this thing together, man, it ain't been easy. Trying to learn my way of podcasting, learning my style of like talking on the microphone, it is not like, to you all as listeners, you'll probably look at it like, man, you got it together and you make it look so simple. And I'm like, not necessarily. There are certain days and certain times where just trying to sit down and structure it all out is like the most challenging thing ever. I've found myself simplifying where I can and automating where necessary. So for instance, like, and I won't even call it an automation tool, but a way that I've gotten a more cleaner structure with recording or just doing the show as a whole is every episode's show notes are saved in a Google Doc. And to some people, it would be like, well, what's the big deal in that? The big deal behind that is I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time I do a new episode. Because once I've recorded the new episode, then I'm able to take the show notes from the last episode, bring them over to the new episode for like a new document, have that document saved, take out whatever added links that I put in that I don't need, and then add in whatever I'm going to talk about on the next show, and just change the introductory part, because the introductory is literally what I use. And this isn't anything that's like riveting or shock value, because most podcasters already do this. What I'm using for that intro portion is what's going to be used on my Instagram post, because then you're not having to reinvent the wheel, because you can connect it all together. And I mean, like I said, 400 shows, man. Like, I've had to find so many ways to like simplify it. There was even a point with Buzzsprout with Spreaker, where I had my own domain for the podcast page. And what I would do is I was literally taking the link from that page, bringing it over to a domain that I had. Like, I would have the WordPress page, the WordPress site, taking the link from Spreaker, bringing it over, making sure all the links were clickable, everything was like simplified, having a structure, making sure I had a page that was clean and simple. Because in some instances, you may have it where people may want to listen to it on a podcast page, but then you got most folks who are like, look, is it going to come up on my podcast app since I'm subscribed? Yep. All right, well, I'll just listen to it there. All right, I got you. But you as a creator, you have to make sure that your content can hit those where it needs to, other than the traditional places that you're expecting it to hit. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm talking about this a little bit now only because a lot of times when people create, they automatically think, okay, I'm going to create to Facebook. Or when people do podcasting, and I've said this on the show numerous times, people think of podcasting and the only thing they think of is they want it on Apple. And I'm like, first of all, everybody doesn't have an iPhone. When the Apple Podcast app was introduced on the original iPhone, most people didn't even know the app existed. It was when people started to really make podcasting a thing, once people realized there was profit and income, a source of income with podcasting, that's when Apple Podcasts became like the wave. But the key thing is, even with you getting your podcast approved to go to Apple, you still want to get those other avenues. I call it the big three. The big three that you want is Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. If you're on those three, you're already on the right track. Your next level is then getting to the Amazons, the Pandoras, iHeartRadio. And then after that, you want to get to what's known as the third parties. The third parties are going to be those applications that some people are not going to use, the big dogs. They're not going to download Spotify. They're not going to use Google Podcasts, and they're not using Apple. They don't have an iPhone to begin with. So now you got to meet them where they are with third-party apps such as Acast, Pocket Cast. Oh my gosh, I used to have all of them. I can't remember them all offhand, but there's so many different Deezer. There's so many different TuneIn's one. You want to make sure you're on those platforms as well, because that could be your first of many opportunities to get heard and get the information out there that you need to other people to make things happen, and roll from there. So that's my dialogue on, like I said, and all of it is just kind of bringing it together, just like how important it is to put the pieces together and how it all makes sense and what's getting us to where we are. And in a bit, I'm going to talk about where we're going and kind of what the stature of the future of the podcast looks like in some way, shape, or form. Can I move this? No, that's kind of weird. All right, well, that's not fun. Unless it's just me. Okay. All right, guess not. All right, I'm gonna try to do it every which way possible. Maybe that's a desktop thing, but I digress. A couple weeks ago, so many of you know I do bullet journaling. I'm going to talk about bullet journaling in a bit because I got some big news with that. But I've been always trying to find those ways to like journal, even if I'm not able to journal. And so I've been following a group where I talk about them frequently and often, Space Time Monotasking. Shout out to y'all. The weekly Wednesdays have been a vibe and a half, to say the least, between my workflow and just my personal restarts of like, hey, I need a moment to just kind of work on some stuff, and going in there for a quick 1 hour session. And even with being a non-paid member, but still having like the Discord space open for anyone to just kind of hop in and meet others who are like, hey, we're all body doubling and we're trying to work on some stuff to get through the day, and we need somebody to make sure we're working on what we're working on. And it goes a very long way, to say the least. But they introduced a title or a term called microjournaling. And what microjournaling is a template that they were able to create in Notion, where you will go in and whatever day it is that you're on, you write kind of like a news title or headliner. And the headliner would be like a representation of your journaling that you would have done for the full day. The advantage to using this on a personal level is that I will do this in Notion, but I can go back and look at them and add them in my bullet journal for the days that I may have missed or whatever. So I've learned to really latch and love how resourceful that tool is on every level. And it's good to start at some point with journaling. And I think, I've mentioned this before. I even gave the app some attention. The journaling app that you have is a general app on iPhone is a good app. Pen and paper, you can't go wrong. If you're using any notepad that you can have to be private, not a bad option either. I've done this before. Everyone has their thing. I used to go even as far as I made a WordPress page just for journaling, and it couldn't have been a better option to use at that time. So finding that thing that works for you, finding that way that works for you is so key, especially when you know that you're in a position of needing to get some thoughts out on paper. So I would definitely stand behind that where possible. So I've been doing the show, as you all know, for over 400 episodes. And one thing that I don't do enough, and I'm going to be learning how to implement these into the show, is to talk about some of some people look at it as affiliates, some people look at it as sponsorship, some people look at it as brands. But I'm personally looking at it as companies that are wanting to back my brand of what I do as a podcaster or as a content creator, and also something that can be helpful for you all to get some discounts. So the newest one that has joined the table is the bullet journal. I've been using the bullet journal now for 4 years, and they open their doors and opportunities to providing folks with a affiliate link. So I have one. The link is in the show notes. If you are looking to get 10% off, just put in code Bryan Bujo. So that's my first name, Bujo. I don't have my accessory with me, and I'm not really hurt about it, but I thought about it as I was on the way in. I was like, how did I forget that? But things happen. I think I was too excited to bring the Stanley mug, but I'm curious. Something tells me they have an affiliate link, but I'd be curious to see if they do it for podcasts. We'll see. I'll do some research on it and get back to you. But I didn't bring my brick accessory where I normally will, like brick, to make sure certain apps I'm not using while working on tasks or activities through the day. I do have an affiliate code with them. Their product, as I mentioned before, is $49. But if you buy more than one, you get them discounted. So I'd keep that in mind if you're needing more than one. You may just need one and done and be just fine. But I also get a discount with them as well. If you go through your shopping, you can go put in Bryan Brick. So that's Bryan with a Y, Brick. And you can get 10% off there as well. I believe it's 10% off. And if you're not 100% sure, and if I'm, like I said, I'm maybe bludgeoning it a little bit, you can just click on the link in the show notes, and that will also you're directly using my affiliate link there as well. I'm working on this now, but I do have a code with the Ono roller, the Ono scroller, the Ono accessories. Y'all know I live and breathe Ono. Ironically, I have two Ono products with me today. I have my Ono roller and I got my Ono scroller. Still trying to find my Ono aluminum. It is somewhere. It is hiding from me. I am mad because I got that one because I thought I had lost my original one. As soon as I got the new one, the original one popped up. And since having the original one frequently, the aluminum one has disappeared. And I'm like, all right, I need my aluminum because I want to, mix and match between the two. And I also like the weight of the newer one. And I have a code with them as well. Currently, it is Bryan Taylor, so just my first and last name, one word, and you get a discount from them as well. I have a link with Bagby also. So if anyone who knows me knows I'm always preaching and talking about digital well-being. One of their key products two of their key products that I have probably used the most would be the Bagby bags, the traditional bags I have the original old school bags that they have. They've upgraded them to a newer style where you can hang it on the back of your door. It makes your phone a lot less visible. It has an option. It has a little compartment on the side where you can place your cord through and then charge your phone. It gets you in a better habit of not having your phone in your room. Most people don't realize the number one thing that keeps people up the most is their phones and just doom scrolling at night. And lately, I've probably been the bigger advocate of not using technology in the evening, and it's been a big difference in my day-to-day activity. But I do have a affiliate link with them as well. So if you are listening to the podcast, the link that's in my show notes has their product. The other item that they have that I don't use it enough, but I love when I'm reminding myself to use it, they have a sleep mask. You can literally put this mask on. It's not too heavy, but it's heavy enough where if you cover your eyes with it, you pretty much are put in a position of a dark room. Because when you're sleeping, you need that dark space. I'm one of those people who everyone's always heard me talk about natural lighting or just using, I try my hardest to not use lights in a office or in a building or in a room. Like when you turn on lights in a room, like personally, unpopular opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of fluorescent lights like that. And I know a lot of folks are like, well, what's wrong with them? And I'm like, there's really nothing wrong with them in particular. They just don't have it for me anymore. But if you give me just a light that can give off like natural lighting or similar to the ring light style, put one of those on, I'm up and I'm alert. May have to have a Red Bull, may have to have some type of energy, but it's been a helpful thing to say the least. So, but yeah, back to as far as with the Bagby product, the Bagby brand, I say those two, but then of course the third one, which I can't ignore, is the alarm clock. Silent alarm clocks are underrated. I understand everyone is about using their phone as an alarm clock, but it's time to go back to what works, which is using your phone as a phone and your alarm clock as an alarm clock. So get an alarm clock, set your time for it. The thing that I like about their alarm clocks is, so mine's, as many people have heard me talk about a lot, it goes off at 5. So when it goes off at 5, as soon as it's done, I'm not able to set it until that evening after about 5:30, 6 o'clock. So that's been a helpful resource to have, to say the least. Finally, and we have not gotten an official word. Still waiting on the news for this. I'm looking to get an affiliate link or a code with the brand Anchor. Ironically, for the podcast right now, I believe I'm using one accessory for them. Usually one, because I have the actual plug for my laptop as an Anchor source. Usually I'm using the Anchor cables, the Anchor wall chargers, you name it. I'm like the Anchor guy. Today might be one of the first days in a while that I didn't leave with one of my power banks, because I usually try to keep one with me just in case, because it's always that you never know type of scenario. So once I get that link, that will definitely be a good kickstart to a couple of things in the future, or with the podcast, because I will look to do more in speaking on different products and my viewpoints about them. So I don't want to ignore that where able. So the show, as I've mentioned, we've been rocking this show for a while. I would probably say in the last 2 to 3 years, I think guests have become like a more interesting yet entertaining component, because now what happens is I'm getting more people to come on and just share. And it's been a fun experience. It's been helpful for me in not having me talk as often. So I'm definitely appreciative of anyone who's been on the show. If you are interested in joining the show as a guest, or if you just want a podcast in general and you need some tips and tricks, the pastbtpod@gmail.com. Send me an email. Tell me who you are. Give me the rundown. Let me know where you're at. What can I do to help you? What do you want to come on the show as a collab, and kind of get a feel for what my day-to-day looks like with the podcast? Just to kind of get some understanding of it, and that might be what you need to kickstart you into the podcast realm. So don't turn your back on that opportunity if you don't feel the need to. I don't have I put this as a topic, but it's really not a topic, but I'll still talk about it anyway. The future of the podcast looks like me being more open to just sharing what I can and not making it a complicated process along the way. Because a lot of times you can find yourself trying to do more than you need to with podcasting, when in reality it's gonna sound crazy to say it, but the effort that most folks think is involved with podcasting really isn't. It just comes down to you knowing who you are and what you want to do with your show. And that's been my big element more than anything, is just being sure that the show has the proper content necessary to keep it going. Like, I don't think I've shared this on the show, and I think I got this information from Spacetime, which they shared it through the Nielsen report. It might be in my show that I did last week, and ever since I've heard this, it's been living with me for a while. And that is the amount of content we streamed last year. There was a Nielsen report done that confirmed that we streamed 21 trillion hang on. Wow, this is actually, so I didn't even know this was a story. Oh, you're 1 trillion streams. Okay. But yeah, just all in all, like, we've really become very consuming of content, and it's just a lot. So I try to make sure that when you're getting that opportunity to listen to the podcast, that it's not like an annoyance or boring. It's like fun and enjoyable. So that's my take on that. The Vision Pro has been out for a couple of months. There's been a lot of talk about it. There's been a lot of opinions. There's been a lot of I ain't feeling it type of top conversation. I have not personally seen one in person. I do not have any intentions on getting a Vision Pro. I don't have the whole I ain't got it, I don't have no money. It's just not an impressive product to me currently. And it's not that I don't think that it will be useful. The interesting thing is, this is the beginning. And if you really, really, really look at this, and this is not This is not Apple fanboy. This is Tech 101, and I'm about to really lean in and give y'all some insight and perspective on this, because I don't think as consumers we understand how intense this becomes. Think back to the first iPhone. Think back to the first AirPods. Think back to the first MacBook. Think back to this virtual headset as like the first headset of trying this out. Also, even think of the the AirPod Max Pros or whatever, the big headphones that Apple has. And my sister has them. While I was there last week, I didn't even think once to like listen to them or see how they sound or anything, because I was like, I like them, but then I'm also like not that person that needs that type of, like, they just look, the weight is my concern about them because of how the quality of the product is top tier. So I'm expecting them to have a bit of weight to them. But on the flip side, I also want to be able to feel comfortable wearing them. That's like my personal alarming concern, but that's me being me. The one thing that I've stuck with is, before I say that, I'm sorry, my bad. All of the products that I just mentioned, because I was really about to go and lose my train of thought. All of the products I mentioned were all the first, like their first products have led us to where we are now with a lot of technology. So for instance, when the first iPhone came out, there weren't many smartphones on the scene. The G1 was nowhere near competing to what the iPhone was doing. But thanks to the iPhone's trend of being that initial phone, we now have the Galaxy phones that are becoming bigger and have better cameras, having quality charging. Like the process for charging a phone should not be as complicated as it was before. Like, you should not have to sit and worry with a phone not lasting for the whole day. But now, because more people have more applications on their phone and they're using their phone for more purposes than just phone calls and text messages, we need this phone to last like for a few hours, as in at least 7 or 8 hours. Like, you don't want to have a phone not be able to last you through your workday. It is one of the most challenging things. And as someone who has worked in healthcare for a fair amount of time, I will be the first to admit it brings things into perspective when you look at a phone not holding a charge for a certain period of time and you're at work like, all right, I'm down to like 20%. What do I do? And you're doing like most people, where you're carrying around power banks in your back pocket and all this other stuff. We're trying to get away from that if we can. The only time you should be needing a power bank is if it's like your phone is like, I would say 15% or less, and the power bank is at 100%, and it's at least a 10,000 milliamp. If you have a 5,000 milliamp and a low battery, if the power bank is full, I still would not, like, you're going to get enough to get you through, but you're not going to have enough to get you by. And I'm going to just leave you with that. But going back to my initial thought, like even down to like AirPods forced a lot of companies to improve their audio quality for earbuds. Like JBL has brought out some good earbuds. The Galaxy Buds, I personally think, are very underrated. The Google Pixel Buds aren't talked about enough. Beats has tried to get into that mix with making sure their earbuds, yes, they're part of Apple, but they're on the more not as expensive side, but still of the quality to get what you need. Your main focal point, which I'm always thinking about, that's why I use that's a strong reason why I use my AirPods the most, is if I plug these into my iPad, not my iPad, if I wear them with my phone and I'm on a phone call, is the person going to have a difficulty with hearing me? And if the answer is no, then I'm good. But if it's like they having a hard time hearing me, or they like, hey, you're in a rough spot, I don't know what's going on, then that becomes a problem. Like, I've had people, I remember using the studio buds at one time, and somebody was on the phone with me, and they were getting mad with me like I was intentionally trying to like have a bad call, and I was like, "Yo, I'm just using some studio buds, and I didn't really think anything of it." So now I always personally keep my AirPods Pros charged up as much as and often as possible. I used to use the OG AirPods. I think I just had them like stowed away now because to start, they really don't like today. They really don't hold hardly any charge at all. But my bad. I know that's like one of my unusual tech tangents that I normally will have, but I wanted to be sure that I shared it before I forget. So that's where I'm at with that. I like this topic because this is something that many people don't recall, but I remember going through this phase. Everyone who's been keeping up or knows about the podcast now knows, like, when you look up my podcast, you see a picture of me holding a microphone. At that time, even in me doing it, I did like one of my first photo shoots ever. Overdue to do another one soon. Have not forgotten. Just life moving at 100 miles an hour. Nothing unusual. But when I initially did the show, I really was trying to keep like a very mystique persona, because a lot of people, and I've had this conversation with many people, and I'm not against this at all. When you're starting out with a show or starting out with content, your first thought is usually, I don't want as many people to see or know who I am or what I do. And if they do know, they know it only because I happen to talk about it in passing. But as a whole, I really try to keep, like, at least from my personal perspective, I keep a lot of what I am private. Or I was looking to do that. As time progressed, though, you learn along the way, like, how you think something gonna go is usually the opposite from where it ends up going. And it became the opposite just because of the simple fact that I realized that if I'm gonna share what I am or who I am or what I do, folks need to see me. They need to understand who I am, what I look like, the human, real, truest form of it. And so I came from behind that persona of like the mystique factor, and eventually just let the show be the show. Like I put more. I let down a lot of layers to get more clarity of being true to who I am, and more than anything, it comes down to when you realize in your life that people are there or not there or whatever the case may be. It's like, hey, if they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. And you don't have to put yourself in this like chaotic position to like push yourself in positions where you don't need to feel like it shouldn't be forced. It should genuinely be organic more than anything. So that's my personal take on the persona. And the only reason I bring up the persona part is because there were a few cover arts that I had for the podcast where it was literally a picture of me in silhouette form because I didn't want anybody to see who I was. Like and I'm still thinking about it. I may change the cover art to one of the other pictures that I have, and still kind of keep everything on the picture, everything on the post still the same, but submit that as kind of like the new look for the like to represent the podcast. So we'll see. I'm thinking about that. I haven't committed on that and said, oh yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna do it. It's just more so of it's a good idea to consider, especially with how far and how long I've been doing the show. Because sometimes a little bit of change isn't a bad thing, but you just want to always be aware of how to handle change as it comes. So that's what I have for that. We already talked about episode 400. Like I said, I'll be uploading that. You will get both shows in their order. I'm not gonna like post 401 and then go back and post 400. Not doing that. Along with the fact that, and this is this is probably like the miracle of magic without being a miracle of magic. Many times when you hear the recording, that wasn't the day it was recorded. It could have been recorded like a week ago, a month ago. You never know. It all comes down to the person it comes down to the person who's creating the content and how quick they're looking to get that out and around to other people. That's kind of what it comes down to. One other topic, and then I got a message to pass along, because even I personally won't allow myself to not ignore this achievement or accomplishment, because it was a big deal to me when I realized it. There are two different avenues when it comes to content on social media or online in general. It doesn't even have to be social media, just online. There are the creators, there are the people who create this content, and there are the people who consume this content. Consumers benefit the world just as much as the creators. However, the creators have to create things for the consumers to be able to consume. I know that probably sounded confusing, so let me break this down on a bit of a simpler level. And I talked about this on a TikTok video early this morning because it was like heavy on me to talk about. So I was like, yeah, I've been like kind of hibernating, and I know folks have been like, where you been? What's going on? Is everything all right? And I just kind of like faded out. But now I'm ready to kind of ease back in, but ease back in with intention. And an example I think of is when you go to a business or a store. Matter of fact, I'll give an even better example. Pop-up shops. Pop-up shops is the perfect example of this. At a pop-up shop or a pop-up event, you have consumers who are coming to consume the products that the business owners have made. And you also have the creators of these products who are looking for the consumers to consume these products. And a lot of times the simplest consumer is your next door neighbor at these events. Because you may have something that a person beside you may need, and you can do it wouldn't be on a barter basis, because you still want to do business and get your return on investment and your, not interest, but profit. So it's just being more aware of that in the process of creating your product. But make sure that the product if the product has the push to be presented to those who need it, then they're going to buy it. The end, no other way to put it. So I'm beginning to realize more and more, I can't be the consumer without first being the creator, because I create a lot of stuff. And a lot of times in the process of doing these creations, I'm ignoring the fact that someone's going to consume it. Now, whether they like it or dislike it is a separate discussion on its own, but it needs to be made available for folks to consume it. Which ties into my message that I'm gonna pass along, because I know if y'all hear the singing in the background, my bad. I'm going, like I said, and I say it like that, but then it's always funny because when I go back and I do my editing tools, it works where you don't hear it, and I'm like, I don't even know what I did, but it worked. So, message I'm gonna pass along, plain and simple. This time last year, and I always have this memory in my brain because I literally can recall everything that happened around that time of finding out the news, being uncertain of what was going to happen. Like, there was so many different little things going on before it all just made sense. So I'm going to do my traditional timeline painting, if you will. So I was in, let's see, they may not even have it on here, focus time. Oh yeah, I was doing focus time back then too. Okay, that was afterward, blah, blah, blah. All right. So going through the thought process and realizing it, a lot of transitioning happened behind the scenes to get me to the point I'm at now. And why I say it like that is because it's still surreal to realize that when I got so it was because I want to say it was like if I'm putting the thoughts down as I remember it, between that, where can I start? Between that Friday of getting the news of starting the new job, along with that following Monday of being off and not really having a day, to somehow ending up with a laptop. And when I got the laptop, I remember I was like, yeah, I'm a finance, thinking it was like, okay, it'll take like a while or whatever. When it got down to me keeping track of it, I was like, hold on, I only got like this much left to pay, meaning I only got like 3 payments left. And when I got down to 2 payments, I was like, all right, we're getting closer. Then I got 1 payment. Well, the last payment, because I was able to pay it earlier, wasn't the full amount that it would have initially been. And so I went online and I saw the amount and I was like, I'm gonna just go ahead and pay this now. And so now I am pretty much in possession. This laptop belongs to me. And why I share that or why I say that is because now it's not that I couldn't do any work on it in the previous year, because I've worked on some stuff and I've did some designing. I've done some Udemy courses. I've learned some stuff. Heck, I've even gone and I've bought. So anyone who knows about the TikTok shop, there is a stand that was probably one of the most highly talked about stands on TikTok, because what it does is it takes your laptop and it rises it to a better viewing point. And I'm sharing this because I already had one of them and I was using it at the time for my monitor, because I was like, yeah, I want my monitor to kind of sit up a little bit, get a better visual. And then I was like, I need a second one. So I went on another site, AliExpress, that I've been on off and on for years. And they had a similar version of the stand that I'm using now, because one of my stands is branded by the company and the other one isn't, which is not a big deal one way or the other. But it's just funny to me when I look at having this, and I have 2 of these stands because one I'm always going to use on my laptop, and the second one is just in case I decide I want to use my monitor as a external monitor. Plus, I can also do it if I'm let's say I'm going somewhere and I want to work from a remote location. I am a keyboard and mouse guy with using laptops. I use the keyboards and the mouse or the trackpad that's on the computer. But if you've given me a preference between which would I like to use more, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to use an external keyboard and an external mouse. It's just what I've gotten used to. And I'm mentioning that, or I'm talking about that now, because in the time of me owning my tablet, not my tablet, but owning my laptop, I've made sure that any accessories or any things that I need to use it properly have been available. And in having those things available, it's been able to make my workload or workflow with using it more productive. And to some people, it's it's not a big deal. It's just a stand, or, it's just a timer. What's the big deal in having a timer? And personally, when you're in that position of trying to do those small things to become better, inch by inch, piece by piece, portion by portion, you find that these are the starting points to do it. And I say all of this, and this is probably where the message is going to hit the hardest. Your environment plays a role into your everything. And what I mean by that is, if you're working in a space that you have an endless amount of room to maneuver, to work, to kind of do your thing, you get shit done. Plain and simple. But if your space feels clustered, congested, stressed out, like this, and this is the simplest example. When I come into the library and I work on, like if I do my podcast, if I'm editing, if I'm doing whatever, I can literally, like, even though I'm in a conference, in a study room, I can literally set up my desk to a T of like everything I need, and I'm spread out like from one end to the other. When I'm in the office, it's the same thing. But the challenge becomes doing that in public or at different facilities is cool. But then the bigger piece is, can you do that in your own environment? And if the answer is no, it then forces you to have to zoom out and start at home. Because once you have that type of setting and that type of environment at home, it's only up with the rest of your spacing. And I really think we have to, as people, work harder to make sure we make our areas and our spaces more comfortable to our liking and not as conflicting to what we're needing to do. Before I finish the show, I want to share with you all, because I'm still on this path. The digital well-being journey is still a thing. I have not read it in a while, but I still have Catherine Price's book, How to Break Up with Your Phone. And I will be going through those other books, because I'm looking at that balance of, if I have to use these apps, sure, I'm going to use them, but I don't want them to be dominant in usage. I want them to be useful in dominance. I want y'all to hear that again. I don't want these applications to be dominant in usage, but to be used in dominance. Because once you share what you need to share with others to get your information out there to other people, you're now the person that, and I don't want to say people are coming to you like, yo, I need your content, but it also becomes a space of, I'm really looking forward to what this individual is about to share. And I've gotten that on endless occasions when it comes to my podcast. Like, I've had people that, if I don't record for a while, it's like, yo, is the show good? Everything all right? And I'm like, yeah, everything's fine. I just haven't been recording. And it really has more to do with making sure that I'm in a position that I'm not just throwing, like, the worst thing you want to do is be in a position to just throw a show up online just to put a show online. Like, there are enough people in the social media / content world who are doing that for us that we don't need to add insult to injury. So that's what I got for that. And as I mentioned earlier, please check out the links that are in the show notes for any of the products that are there. If you find something that might be useful, heck, even if you happen to buy something, and I got another one I'm gonna look at soon. I don't want to talk about it yet, but I got at least two that I know I want to look at soon, and seeing if I can get any links with them, because I haven't got one of them. I won't be, well, both of them. I wouldn't really be getting stuff from them in the future, but I do want to get folks out there to use their product if they can find it to their convenience or to their proper usage. So that is what I have for y'all today. I appreciate you all tuning in. I'm going to work some strings. I know I always say that, but I really do want to get a guest on soon. I got somebody that I've really been holding like close to the chest, literally, to get on the show, because he's been talking to me about it. And I got another possible two. I think it's just a matter of trying to set everything up and making sure like schedules are aligned and life is aligned and routines are aligned and all that stuff. So we will see what happens with those options when they arrive. But in the meantime, in between time, this is The Pass. I am your host, BT, and I will catch y'all on the next episode. Take it easy. Truly hope you all enjoyed the show. Definitely was a lot to unpack, but I know you'll walk away with something important as I share the end of each season do find your way to get into podcasting if it's something you would like to do. My podcasts are currently recorded via Buzzsprout. Been very good to me. If you want to learn more about using them, definitely hit me up at thepastbtpod@gmail.com. And also the microphone that you're hearing me on is the Blue Yeti X. Have been rolling with it for over 3 years. We've been doing this ride for quite some time, so I hope someone could find this mic useful. Again, find those people who are good or helpful in what you're trying to do to be better today than you were yesterday. The primary goal is to be 1% better. Hope you all have an amazing day, and we'll be back again to do this next time.